Hi, I'm Phil Robbins from Metz Technologies. In this video I'm going to talk about some of the decisions that are required in order to automate your infrastructure. In the first part of this video series we showed how we can quickly and simply automate your ACI deployments, building complex sets of data sets up based on decisions made by the user via a web form, and following business rules and a naming convention allows complexity to be simplified. If we take the example of the application-centric infrastructure and look at its layout, we can then build up the data following rules based on the user's choices. ACI consists of the following: tenants, bridge domains with subnets, application network profiles or AMPs, endpoint groups EPGs that have VMM domains, with provider contracts and filters and consumer contracts. There are a number of ways that this can be implemented, but once this has been decided, the process to follow can then be automated. Let's assume that we've chosen a /24 subnet per bridge domain. We have two stages per tenant, prod and dev, and these use a bridge domain each. The key here is to have your network architects define the rules of how this works. We need to choose an IP allocation system, either DHCP with reservations or an IPAM solution, or using an API to allocate and retrieve host names to IPs. We need to decide on a naming convention for all of these things and make those choices rigid but flexible. You may choose a name based around two stages, prod and dev, but later on decide to add an integration or pre-prod stage to your infrastructure. Will this break your naming conventions and therefore force you to rebuild everything? There are rules we need to consider. Windows host names are restricted to 15 characters. There are issues around using the underscore with DNS. Once all of this is defined, the user input forms are developed to capture the bare minimum required to be able to build these named values up when automating the build of the objects. For example, which tenant, which stage, prod or dev, what application, what server type. These values then drive the values that are used to build the infrastructure. For example, the user selected TN2 tenant and prod for dummy app servers, and these values are used to build up the ACI elements and ultimately the VM hostname, its IP address and everything required. We don't need to ask the user what bridge domain to use, as we know that based on his selection. We have created a database in Simpler that stores these decisions and use an API call to do CRUD, create, read, update, delete activities on it. We need a new Linux VM hostname for prod with a prefix GB01 TN2 042 L3P XX, where XX should be an incremental number. From this we now know the tenant TN2, the app code 042, it's a Linux server as a type 3 and its stage is P for prod. Using this we can also create our AMP, our EPG, and this connects to our bridge domain. All of this is bundled together under a single ID used to reference the entire dataset and can be retrieved via a REST API call which returns either JSON or XML result set. This data can then be used in an orchestrator to build the VMs or other parts of infrastructure included in the overall request. That concludes our part 2 of our Simpler platform to develop infrastructure using automation. Do get in touch if you'd like to see more.